You burst into the courtroom where the chill is like a freezer, yet the intensity of what's unfolding makes the air feel like it's trembling. She sits across from you, like an actress in her final act, all polished elegance and refined cruelty. Every move is calculated, every glance aimed at your destruction. Her voice, a velvet noose, sweet poison poured over everyone present. Today, she didn't come just to win. She came to annihilate, to smear you across the gleaming floor of this hall. You are her trophy, her proof that she can break anyone. But her mistake is thinking she knows you. She's seen you weak, shattered, lost. But the person sitting before her now is someone else. Someone preparing to end this. No nervous breakdowns, no flashes of rage, just calm, icy confidence. Her eyes are full of contempt, her voice dripping with arrogance. She thinks she's already the victor, never realizing the real game is only just beginning. Because everything she built, lies, manipulation, illusions, is about to collapse under its own weight. She thinks this is her triumph. But in reality, this is your entrance onto the stage. Hello, my friend. I'm so glad you stopped by my channel. If it's your first time here, don't forget to subscribe and like this video, as every like truly inspires me. Please tell me which city and country you watch this video from. Now, let's get started. The courtroom had the chill of a meat locker, unnaturally cold, considering the heat of what was unraveling inside. When the judge's gavel landed with a decisive thud, my soon-to-be ex leaned back in her chair, basking in a silent victory. Her movements were practiced, almost cinematic. Legs crossed just so, the click of her designer heels echoing softly against the polished floor. "Your Honor," she purred, trailing a manicured nail along her cheek, her tone syrupy sweet with a poison center. "Let's not pretend we're confused here." She turned those icy eyes toward me, thick with contempt. "My husband," she said, savoring the word like it tasted bitter, "is like a plow horse, reliable, predictable, and very easy to ride." A ripple of amusement passed through the courtroom, low chuckles, a few stifled reactions. Even her attorney let out a quiet snort. The judge tapped his gavel again to calm the room, but didn't say a word about the insult. I didn't react. Not outwardly. My jaw locked tight, hands braced on the table. She was grandstanding, relishing the spotlight. I wasn't about to give her the pleasure of a response. This divorce? Her idea. No shock there. After nearly 10 years, she decided I wasn't thrilling enough anymore. I didn't sparkle the way she thought she deserved. And instead of walking away quietly, she dragged me here to put on a show and grind me into the ground in front of a captive audience. She'd already taken the house, the one I spent years building, brick by damn brick. She wanted a slice of my company too, though she never did a single day of work for it. And still, even now, she wasn't finished. Her final blow was yet to land. From the back of the room, her new trophy, an immaculately dressed corporate attorney, watched the spectacle with bored amusement. She hadn't even bothered to hide their affair. I found them together in my bed, beneath sheets I paid for, wrapped up like a pair of smug liars. But I wasn't there to crumble. What she didn't know was that this wasn't her curtain call. It was my debut. Her lawyer, dressed like he was about to accept an award, stood and gave his tie a practiced tug. "Your Honor," he said, his voice like polished marble, "my client simply wishes to address concerns about Mr. Hill's future ability to pay alimony. She made considerable lifestyle adjustments during their marriage and deserves adequate restitution." Lifestyle adjustments. That nearly made me laugh. Judge Richardson glanced at me over the tops of his glasses. "Mr. Hill, your response?" I took a slow breath, grounding myself. My grip tightened on the table's edge. Showtime. With calm deliberation, I reached for the top button of my shirt and began unfastening it. The room hushed in an instant. Even the judge leaned forward slightly, eyebrows raised. One button at a time, I undid the shirt, peeled it off, and let it fall aside. The reaction was immediate. Sharp intakes of breath, surprised murmurs. Her smugness faltered. Her boyfriend sat up straighter, suddenly alert. Because the man they were looking at now wasn't the man she'd written off. The last time she really saw me, I was run down, out of shape. A man buried beneath stress and neglect, easy to ignore, easier to betray. But the version standing in front of her now, lean, carved, composed, was a stranger. I'd spent months rebuilding myself, hours in the gym, sweat, pain, relentless focus. I shed the weight she once mocked. I burned through the exhaustion. I reshaped myself into something she couldn't control or diminish. Faint scars lined my torso, physical echoes of personal wars. But what caught everyone's eye was the tattoo across my chest, a workhorse, mid-leap, snapping through a pair of broken chains, stark, defiant, purposeful. She read its meaning the instant she saw it. Her lawyer tried to cut in. "Your Honor, I fail to see how this—" "I do," I interrupted, voice steady, cold as steel. "You want to talk about sacrifices?" I turned from the judge back to her, locking eyes. I gave everything I had for 8 years. I worked overtime so she could find herself. I paid for the bags, the vacations, the procedures. I even gave her part of my company because I believed we were a team. I watched the cracks form in her perfect expression. And how did she repay me? I pointed to the back of the courtroom, at her polished new lover. The room buzzed with whispers. Her attorney opened his mouth, but the judge lifted a hand. "Let him finish." I nodded my thanks and pressed on. "She called me a workhorse," I said, letting a grim smile settle on my face. "Well, this workhorse? He's done pulling dead weight." Her mask began to crumble. I bent down and pulled out a thick envelope, slapping it on the table with a satisfying thump. "Inside," I said, my voice ringing through the chamber, "is evidence of her financial deception. Hidden assets, fake expenses, funds siphoned from my business." She looked like she'd been slapped. Her mouth opened, then closed again. Nothing came out. "And because of that," I said, not missing a beat, "not only am I refusing her alimony demand, I'm suing for damages." The room exploded with murmurs. Her lawyer looked like he'd been hit by a truck, flipping through papers with trembling fingers. She sat frozen, the performance unraveling before our eyes. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I saw something unfamiliar in her face. Not triumph, not disdain, but fear. And this was just the start. A thick, charged silence fell. She sat stiff at the table, nails digging into the lacquered wood. Her haughty confidence, once so blinding, was splintering fast. Her attorney looked like a man watching a tidal wave crawl toward shore, knowing full well he'd drown in it. Because this wasn't the end of my story. This was page 1. "Your Honor," he began, his fingers fumbling awkwardly with the knot of his tie, voice faltering, I'd like to request a short adjournment to go over the—" Judge Richardson raised a hand, silencing him without a word. "Not just yet," he said firmly, turning his sharp gaze in my direction. "Mr. Hill, are you claiming that your wife has engaged in financial misconduct?" I nodded once, steady and deliberate, keeping my expression neutral despite the storm pounding inside my chest. "Yes, Your Honor. I have undeniable proof." I carefully opened the manila folder on the table, revealing an orderly collection of documents: wire transfers, forged financial reports, undisclosed credit card activity, all traced directly to my wife. This wasn't guesswork. It was the result of months of meticulous digging. When I discovered her infidelity, I didn't react with rage. I shifted into tactical mode. There was no way I'd let her walk away with everything after what she'd done. So I flipped the script. I hired a forensic accountant, someone who specialized in sniffing out concealed assets and fraudulent spending. What they found was staggering. She had been siphoning funds from our shared accounts, disguising the theft through fictitious business transactions. Romantic weekends with her lover masqueraded as company retreats. Designer clothing categorized as professional expenses. She even used our finances for the down payment on a condo, solely in her name. My theory? It was her escape plan for when I was bled dry and tossed aside. The cruel twist. She had personally signed off on every transaction. Judge Richardson methodically examined the pages, his face unreadable, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of interest. After a long pause, he addressed her. "Mrs. Hill," he said, peering at her over the rim of his glasses, "how do you respond to these allegations?" I turned to face her, meeting her eyes with the kind of calm that only comes from knowing the truth. She'd always been skilled at spinning lies, but now her composure was slipping. "This is ridiculous," she snapped, laughing nervously. "He's making all of this up. I would never—" "You might want to look more carefully," I cut in, my voice smooth and measured. "Every fraudulent charge bears her signature." I pushed another document toward the bench. "This one," I continued, tapping the paper, "is an email in which she instructs our accountant to divert funds from the business into a personal, unreported account." Her face went pale, the blood visibly draining from her cheeks. I had waited a long time for this moment. "You broke into my email," she whispered, almost inaudibly. "No," I replied, unshaken. "I accessed internal communications from my company, the same business you tried to rob from under me." Judge Richardson let out a long breath, clearly growing weary of the chaos. "Mrs. Hill, these are very serious matters. Your counsel will have a chance to respond shortly. But for now, I will be evaluating the financial records before addressing any decisions regarding spousal support." Her attorney frantically rifled through his briefcase, speaking in hushed tones, clearly trying to regain control of a rapidly collapsing case. But this time, there was no escape hatch. She wasn't running the show anymore. For the first time in our marriage, she had lost control, and I wasn't done yet. Now, it was his turn. I shifted slightly, locking eyes with the man seated near the back, her lover, the smug attorney who had no doubt expected to witness my humiliation. But not anymore. I watched his jaw tighten, his fingers twitching against his leg. I held his gaze and offered a slow, calculated smile. He was next. "Your Honor," I said, rising, "there's one more item I'd like to present before we continue." The judge gestured for me to proceed. I reached into my jacket and produced a small USB drive. "This contains recorded conversations between Mrs. Hill and Mr. Blackwell," I said, nodding toward her boyfriend, who visibly stiffened. "In those recordings, they openly discuss a coordinated plan to deplete my finances before she filed for divorce." Her head jerked toward me, her eyes wide in disbelief. "What?" she shouted. "That's illegal. He's not allowed to record private conversations." I didn't flinch. The recordings were captured inside my home, in a state where single-party consent is legal. Everything was done within the law. Judge Richardson raised an eyebrow, signaling the bailiff to collect the USB. "We'll examine the contents," he said. "If what you claim is true, Mr. Hill, then we are no longer dealing with a conventional divorce proceeding." I watched the color drain from her lover's face. He had no idea she had plans beyond him, too. That was the beauty of it. I leaned slightly toward her, keeping my voice low. "You thought you were outsmarting me," I whispered. "But every move you made led you here." Her jaw clenched so hard I could hear her teeth grinding. She wasn't the puppet master anymore. I had just shattered everything she'd built. And now came the consequences. Judge Richardson inhaled deeply, his tone final. "Given the severity of the accusations, I will require time to thoroughly review all materials before ruling. In the meantime, all joint assets will be frozen." She turned toward him, shocked. "Frozen," she repeated, her voice cracking. "Yes," he confirmed. "You will not have access to any financial accounts, business investments, or shared property until this matter is settled." Her hands began to tremble, and I stood there, calm, unmoved, the one finally holding the power. She turned to her lawyer, panic swimming in her eyes. "Do something," she hissed under her breath, her voice tight with barely contained fury. But the man simply exhaled, pressing his thumbs into his brow like a man already defeated. I returned to my seat with slow, deliberate ease, serene, in control, watching the weight of reality finally crush her assumptions. She had entered the courtroom certain she'd leave victorious, flush with money and smug satisfaction. Instead, she'd just been financially cut off. Entirely. And her latest romantic conquest? Already checking the time, his patience wearing thin by the second. I gave him another glance, cool, composed, and let the smallest smirk play at my lips. He wasn't staying. She was about to learn how quickly a man like that disappears when the money pipeline dries up. But that fallout was hers to manage. For the first time in years, I had the upper hand. The sound of her ragged, shallow breathing filled the courtroom, each inhale a crack in her mask of perfection. The judge's ruling had frozen every one of her accounts, and her carefully choreographed escape plan was starting to fall apart at the seams. And I wasn't done yet. As her attorney fumbled for a response, rambling about re-examining financial records or perhaps introducing new evidence, I turned my attention to the man partially responsible for the wreckage of my marriage, her boyfriend, a slick, polished attorney who'd strutted into court like it was his stage, thrilled to see me suffer. Now, he looked like he wanted the floor to open up beneath him. I leaned back and met his eyes with a steady, unblinking stare. Then I smiled. Time to raise the pressure. "Your Honor," I said calmly, voice smooth as stone. "Before we break, I'd like to submit an additional motion related to the pending financial fraud review." Judge Richardson glanced up from his bench, peering over his glasses. "Go ahead, Mr. Hill." I turned deliberately toward my wife's boyfriend. "According to the supporting documents," I began, "there are multiple suspicious transactions traced directly to Mr. Blackwell." His head jerked toward me, his expression incredulous. "What?" he said, just a bit too fast. The first signs of panic were starting to show. A thin sheen of sweat had appeared along his hairline. Judge Richardson flipped through the submitted pages, eyes narrowing as he paused. "Mr. Blackwell, can you explain why your name appears in these financial transfers?" Jenny whipped around to look at him, shock plastered across her face. This had caught her off guard. She'd roped him into her scheme, and he, true to his ego, never questioned a thing. I don't know what this is about," Blackwell stammered, voice cracking with uncertainty. I gave a dry laugh. "Is that so?" I said, cocking my head. "These records indicate multiple wire transfers to an account under your name, including," I said, lifting a separate document, "a large payment categorized as a legal consultation fee." The judge's brow lifted in interest. "Is that correct, Mr. Blackwell?" I don't handle my personal banking," he stuttered, visibly unraveling. That was the trap. The documents didn't need my commentary. They told the story better than I ever could. He'd taken money from Jenny, probably thinking it was just a clever part of her divorce strategy. But now, it looked a lot like criminal activity. And for a lawyer, that's a career-ending problem. I saw the exact moment he understood how deep he was. His head turned slowly toward her, not with love or concern, but with betrayal carved into his features. "Jenny," he said, barely above a whisper, his voice simmering with rage, "what the hell did you drag me into?" She shook her head frantically, lips trembling. No, it's not what it looks like. I was just moving funds around, that's all. I didn't mean—" Judge Richardson let out a tired, annoyed sigh. "I'm ordering a full forensic audit of both parties' finances, and if Mr. Blackwell is found complicit, he will be subject to the same penalties." Blackwell shot to his feet, eyes wild. "This is insane. I'm not—" "Sit down, Mr. Blackwell," the judge barked, his tone razor-sharp, "or you'll be held in contempt." That shut him up. He sank back into his chair, every trace of swagger erased. His future, his reputation, suddenly on the line. And Jenny finally saw the scale of what she'd lost. The money? Gone. Her assets? Frozen. The man she thought was her golden ticket? Slipping through her fingers. I leaned back again, steady and silent, watching her world collapse. It was over. 15 minutes later, as the judge called a recess, I observed her clinging to Blackwell like a woman drowning. "Please, baby, listen," she begged, voice cracking. "You know I'd never hurt you. It's just, this was all business. We can fix it. We can." Blackwell pulled his arm away like she'd burned him. "You complete idiot," he snapped. "Do you even know what you've done to me?" Her eyes filled, lips trembling. "But you said we'd get through this. You said we were in this together." "I said a lot of things," he cut in, running a hand over his face, pale and stricken. "I didn't agree to be part of a federal case." Her breath caught in her throat. I stood and straightened my jacket, walked past them without a word, until I was close enough to murmur, "Seems like you bet too big this time, sweetheart." She spun toward me, eyes blazing. "You think this means you won?" I paused, looked down at her with the same calm she had mistaken for weakness. "No," I said simply. "I know I did." She hurled her words at me, her fury trembling just beneath the surface. "This is what makes you feel like a man." I met her with a calm, knowing grin, the kind born not of triumph, but of closure. "No," I said, as I slipped my jacket over my shoulders with deliberate care. "This makes me free." I turned, walked away without hesitation. She didn't follow. She couldn't. She stood frozen, broken, stripped of wealth, stripped of power, with no one left to pull her from the wreckage. She was choking on the same poison she'd once poured for me. A full week drifted by in silence before I heard from her again. A message popped up on my phone, sent from an unfamiliar number. "Jenny, I made a mistake. Jenny, please, we should talk. Jenny, I know we can make this right." I laughed, not bitterly, not out of spite. It was the sound someone makes when they finally exhale years of holding their breath. Without even a flicker of hesitation, I erased the message. No reply was necessary. I'd already spoken the only truth that mattered, by walking away. And in that moment, something shifted. A burden I hadn't even realized I'd been dragging behind me simply disappeared. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt light, untethered, free. The woman who once had her claws in every part of my life, my emotions, my bank account, even my legal standing, was now reduced to a memory. A name on a legal file, a cold echo of betrayal. But her descent didn't end when I walked out. While I left whole, she remained teetering on the edge, still clinging to a crumbling illusion of control. What followed was a total unraveling. It started subtly, an ordinary financial review, but the deeper they dug, the darker it got. The court stepped in, launching a full-scale inquiry. What surfaced was devastating. Fraud, embezzlement, a network of hidden accounts. She hadn't just siphoned money, she had drained our entire business dry behind my back. As for alimony, that evaporated. But worse still, she now faced real consequences. Prison was no longer a distant threat. It was a growing possibility. Then her personal world began to crumble. I always suspected Blackwell would flee. He wasn't one for staying when the fire got close. But even I was surprised by how fast he abandoned ship. Just 3 days after the court ruling, his firm released a cold official statement. Total dissociation, citing ethical violations. Blackwell resigned before they could terminate him. Jenny? She was abandoned. No partner, no savings, and now her name was synonymous with scandal. And of course, inevitably, she made one last move. It was evening. I'd just wrapped up a workout at home when a soft but insistent knock came at the door. I thought about ignoring it. Then I figured, Why not face this one last ghost? I opened the door. There she stood, Jenny Hill, once my wife, now just a faded version of the woman I'd once loved. She had tried to keep up appearances, her hair styled, makeup meticulous, but the fear in her eyes betrayed her. The jewelry was gone, likely sold off, just to keep her head above water. "Hey," she said quietly, forcing a strained smile. "Can we talk?" I leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. "Talk about what?" She shifted uncomfortably, letting out a nervous chuckle. "Things got complicated. We both made mistakes." I didn't speak. I just watched. "I miss you," she said eventually, her voice shaky but sincere. One eyebrow lifted. "Do you?" She hesitated, swallowed hard. "Yeah, I mean, we had good years. I lost control. I made a terrible choice." I let silence fill the space between us. Let her sit in it. Her smile faltered. The cracks began to show. Her voice turned sharp. "Jesus, can you stop pretending like you're so perfect? I'm trying here." I let out a quiet laugh. There she was, the real Jenny, the one who mocked my loyalty, dragged me through legal hell, and tried to destroy me. Now she stood at my door, asking for mercy. "You don't miss me," I said, my voice calm and certain. "You miss the life I gave you." Her lips parted, ready to argue, but then closed again. She knew I wasn't wrong. "I've got nothing left," she admitted, voice raw. "No home, no money, no one. I need help. Just a little, until I can get back on my feet." The audacity almost made me laugh, but I didn't. I wouldn't give her another inch of me. Instead, I reached into my wallet, pulled out a $1 bill, and handed it to her. She stared at it like it had slapped her. "You can't be serious," she hissed. I smiled. Consider it my final gesture of goodwill. Her face reddened, humiliation twisting into fury. "You arrogant son of a—" I closed the door before she could finish, and that was the last time I ever saw Jenny Hill. This story has come to an end. What's your opinion? Share it in the comments, my friend. And if you like this story, check out other exciting videos on my channel. I'll say goodbye until the next video. See you.